welcome back to Underreported Stories, where I cover the news at CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report on or don't report on enough. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. It's Tuesday, so you're already into your week, but I got back from a long weekend. This weekend, I went to a friend's wedding in Cabo. It was stunning. I'm so perfectly tan. Just kidding. I'm kind of that like light crisp tan where you know it's gonna wear off by the end of the week, but you feel and look good for like a day or two. That's where I'm at. Anyway, beautiful wedding down in Cabo. I had kind of an epiphany about weddings when I was down there this weekend, because this wedding was the perfect essence of my friend, okay? Like, if you could encapsulate this couple into one day, it would have been this wedding day. And I think that's what I've been getting wrong about wedding culture, or talking about wedding culture. It's not big versus small, good versus bad. It is weddings that capture the essence of the couple versus these generic, boring weddings that are over the top for the sake of being over the top to showcase that you have money or something like that. This wedding was so perfectly done. Like, they're really wild, fun party people, and every step of their wedding exemplified that. And so that's what I loved. I'm so sick of going to weddings where it's just like copy and paste. We're doing it to do it. Like, do it because you want to do it, or because you want to, do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Anyway, that was just kind of a thought off the top of my head. Anyway, not to be so annoying about this, but I'm probably going to be saying this a lot. It's my last week in the studio. So we can get emo about it or not, because what's to come is honestly so much better. But in the next, 2 weeks, basically from February 7th till February 16th, if I am around slightly less, obviously the podcast will still be around, but if maybe we're missing a video that usually would be there on a Monday or a Wednesday, it's just because I'm in the process of moving to the suburbs. We are doing like one of those long ass moves where like you move one weekend and you move some stuff throughout the week, and the movers come the next. It's just like, but we're starting to move off by doing the studio. So I'm going to be moving my second bedroom / studio to our new place this weekend. So come Tuesday next week, which is February 11th, this show is going to look it's going to be the exact same. We're not going to change the format. We're not changing anything. But the look of the studio, the branding, the intro, the logos, all of that stuff is going to look so different and so good. We've been working on this for probably a month now, and I've got to be I'm just being real with you. I'm one of those people that's like, I'm good at keeping your actual secrets, but when it comes to a project or something, I'm one of those people that like wants to show people every little step of it. I'm like, look at what this is, and look at that. That's just how I am. So I'm just ecstatic to show you and share with you what we've been working on. So Tuesday is that day. Anyway, let's get into our big news of the day. We actually have big news that kind of came on right before I started reporting this, that at least 20,000 federal workers have accepted Trump's government buyout offers. This is according to Axios. I just see the headline and like a little bit of information, and I want to make sure I give you guys the most up-to-date, accurate information on this. So I'm not going to report this out quite yet, but I'm hoping to put out some sort of reel or YouTube short in the next 24 hours with all the information we have thus far. So keep your eyes peeled on that. But stories we do have that we can talk about and that are very good are the tariff story, as well as Trump's continued deportations efforts. And I want to talk about those two off the bat. Let's start off with the tariffs. More specifically, I want to talk about the Canadian tariff war. If you could even call it a war. I don't think you can call this a war. It's not a war. It was literally over in the blink of an eye. It went so quickly. But in case you guys didn't know this, I'm Canadian. Like, kind of. I was born in Canada, but I came here when I was 4.5 or 5. So I've only ever known being American, really. And this month, end of February, I'm celebrating 10 years of citizenship. And I'm so excited about that. Like, I have lived here my whole life. I'm so happy to be a citizen. I love it. I have no allegiance to Canadian brethren, but I just feel like I can give you a foray into the mindset of Canadians that other creators and journalists simply can't, because this is my life and my family and everything. So in case you missed it, Trump threatened and then paused his planned 25% tariffs on Canadian imports for 30 days after the human tampon equivalent of, Justin Trudeau. He announced new border security measures, and after that, the tariffs were dropped. Now, in full transparency, I'm not entirely sure why border security measures were like the biggest deal on our northern border relative to our southern border. And I think what kind of miffed me about the strategy was why the same level of tariffs were levied against both countries, both Canada and Mexico, for what I would say is not controversial, a disproportionate problem that comes from the South, right? Mexico has a way bigger problem with their border than we do with our border in Canada. So the idea that the same tariffs were levied against both countries, I found that to be odd. But at the same time, what I've learned in the last 8+ years of covering Donald Trump is I don't question the madness of the man anymore, okay? Because clearly it worked. But Canada, including, I might add, the really based politicians in Canada, they announced retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. almost immediately. There was one instance, I believe it was British Columbia, saying that they wouldn't import alcohol specifically from red states, which was clearly a target on Tennessee and Kentucky. Okay, interesting target. But beyond just like the political tariffs of this, there were the cultural sentiments. There was a lot of backlash being reported in mostly mainstream outlets about the way the Canadian people were reacting to the American people. And one of the instances was this Canadian Reddit thread that I'm going to pull up here. And what was odd, I guess, about it was how viral it went. It reads, "Dear Americans, you will never be forgiven." And then the post proceeds to call us all a bunch of imperialists and hopes that we collapse as a nation. But I think posts like this, they're being amplified because the corporate media, this is what they want us to believe. They want us to believe that Donald Trump's ego is so big he couldn't follow through on the tariffs that he placed on Canada because the so nice Canadians didn't like him. Oh, they booed the American flag at a Toronto Raptors game, and that changed Trump's mind. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Now, as a Canadian, I guess I'm going to call former, because technically I'm a dual citizen, but I lost my Canadian passport when I was perhaps a little too intoxicated in college. So I don't even know if I would consider myself Canadian anymore by even the legal means. But anyway, my parents grew up very Canadian, so I have a lot of foray into this. They grew up their whole lives there, okay? They moved here to California and then to Illinois, and then just kind of lived all over. But they moved here when they were in their early 30s with us, and I can confidently say Canadians have hated Americans well before the tariff threats. Like, this is not a new sentiment in the slightest, and I think that's the media wants us to think like, oh my gosh, the Canadian people revolted, and that's what drew Trump to the negotiating table. No. My dad has openly told me about how difficult it was for him to move to America because he really didn't like America. They have kind of like, and this isn't a slight to them, it's just like they kind of have this big brother syndrome with America where they kind of view themselves as like, why are we constantly number two? These people are so bombastic and rude and brash, and they're just a very meek and mild, like, group of people, generally speaking. You know, I wouldn't consider myself in that category either, and I'm Canadian ancestry as well, right? So that has kind of like always been a culture in Canada, and this idea that the tariffs created a whole new anti-American sentiment is just stupid. You're either not paying attention or you're not paying attention. Like, there's no in between. So I don't think that Trump backed down on the tariffs because the Canadians booed our flag, okay? He backed off because the tariffs are a bargaining tactic used to threaten our allies into building up necessary infrastructure so we, as Americans, don't have to pay for it. And if you don't realize the genius in this, this isn't for you, okay? Turn the show off now. This is not for you. Anyway, another big story we've been following is the immigration and deportation efforts by the Trump administration. And over the weekend, the weirdest underreported story snuck by from Phil Murphy, the governor of New Jersey. He said in this weird-ass interview that there's an illegal immigrant who is living in his garage. And then he taunted the feds and said, you can't get her. Like, they're the feds. They can definitely get her. But what I found so odd about this whole situation, like, okay, proclaiming that you have an illegal immigrant in your house when I'm going to assume he obviously doesn't have, like, this is all political show and theater. But honestly, if you're interested in protecting this person from deportations, which he shouldn't, but in his case, if he was actually interested in his version of virtue, why would he out her location? Because after this weird interview, to which a Murphy aide, by the way, has since said that the governor is being misinterpreted. I don't know how he could be misinterpreted. I listened to it. Like, he clearly was saying that there was an illegal immigrant living in his house. But Tom Homan, our border czar, is now investigating Governor Phil Murphy and threatening legal action against him for harboring an illegal immigrant. I'm like, this is what we need. We need more action against these crazy things. And this is not at all, let's be clear, this is not at all about Phil Murphy being a righteous person. This is being used by him to score political points with the far left base, who they have the tendency to compare the hiding of illegal immigrants and like harboring of illegal immigrants to the hiding of Jews in Nazi Germany. They love to do this shit. So this is just him trying to score political points, not be a good or virtuous person by dint of even bringing this up, even if it was totally a lie, which it obviously was. Anyway, let's get into our underreported stories today. I want to talk about the disbanding of USAID. I got that request a lot from you guys on Instagram to talk about that. I also want to talk about Donald Trump's executive order to stop the medical transitioning of children and a state that is refusing to comply with this, plus the airport authority workers charged with leaking videos of the tragic DC plane crash. Sorry, words. They have been arrested. And we have got to get to all those stories and more. So without further ado, these are the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Today's show is brought to you by Based, my merch line. And we've just unveiled our winter line with a new beanie, a hoodie, a shirt, and a tote bag. I'm an independent creator, and one of the best ways, if not the best way, to support this show is by purchasing my merch line that represents your views. Instead of just asking you guys for donations to fund my independent journalism, my business partner and I created a line of merch called Based Apparel. Based basically means the opposite of woke. It means you're based in logic, based in truth, based in facts. You get it. Anyway, head over to basedandlogicapparel.com to check out our latest apparel. My personal favorite right now is our Based two-tone shirt, which I'm wearing right now. And remember, when you buy merch, you are directly supporting this show. And when you get your apparel, please be sure to tag me on Instagram so I can repost it. There's been a lot of conversation about the disintegration of the U.S. Department of International Development, or USAID. So Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, so 2 acronyms you need to know, USAID and DOGE, okay? DOGE is pushing the Trump administration right now to dissolve USAID, which the agency on its face doesn't seem like it's an inherently evil thing, right? It's the agency that's responsible for giving our development assistance out to countries and people in need, specifically in Africa. And I actually will say credit where credit is due. USAID has done a wonderful job at branding itself as a kind of like Doctors Without Borders charity mission. Like, we're helping the most needy people in the world. But it's actually one of the largest official aid agencies in the world. And it's so big that we're finally finding out what the USAID is spending money on after a DOGE analysis. So I've currently already reported that we've spent $15 million on funding contraception and birth control to the Taliban, $50 million to Gaza and Jordan for gynecological care, similar birth control efforts, but there's some more. And by the way, I've seen in the comment a lot, I've been reporting on this $15 million to the Taliban, $50 million to Gaza and Jordan. They are 2 separate stories. I keep getting a lot of comments. I thought it was 50. I thought it was 50. Blah. They're two separate. It's 65 million in total, but two separate, just to clarify. But these are some other programs that we're funding right now. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, I think this is objectively insane spending. We are spending $1 million to make disabled Tajikistanis climate leaders. We're spending $1 million for foreign DEI programs, including indigenous language technology in Guatemala. We spent nearly $100,000 to a Palestinian activist group whose leaders hailed the one of the Palestinian Liberation Front, whatever they call themselves. We basically spent $100,000 on terrorism, and then we spent $1 million to a Hamas-linked charity, $1.5 million to empower female climate activists in northern Kenya, $15 million for contraceptives and condoms in the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. Yeah, the list goes on, but those are some major ones that really showcase how absolutely insane the spending has gotten over at USAID. Now, Democrats are big mad about this because they believe that Elon Musk's efforts to minimize USAID's spending is somehow thwarting Congress's power of the purse. Now, I understand the argument. I'm quite sympathetic to the idea that once Congress passes a law, it is, we're supposed to enact that law whether we like it or not. But I think people on the internet are getting smart about this, like Americans are getting smart about this, and they think that this is all a money laundering scheme. And so when we're talking about congressional spending, it's like, do we have to enact the laws of truly money laundering to other countries? I think the money is also designated to USAID. USAID doesn't have to spend it on Taliban contraceptives, right? Now, USAID and its original mission, I don't really have too much of a problem with. But what it's done is it's slowly evolved into America becoming the sugar daddies of the world. That's the best way I can describe it, right? And what anti-Trump people miss when they're attacking him for going after democracy, going after funding that's been approved by Congress, blah, blah, blah. They are missing that getting rid of some of this aid, which is, again, I'm not saying we should get rid of that money. We should use that $50 million to help Oakland or something. Let's help Americans with that money. But what these anti-Trump people miss is, he is forcing other countries to bolster their own spending because we're taking it away from them. They're forced to bolster their own security because they should be doing that on their own. We shouldn't have to subsidize this. Just because England or a European Union country, or, this isn't common in Africa, but these countries that have big social welfare systems, we're not subsidizing your national security so you can have these programs. We need to be spending our money on our people, not spending it on your military necessities because your dumbasses don't know how to spend money properly. That's not the job of Americans. I think people are waking up to that. But here's where the underreported aspect of this story comes in. So not only is the USAID a seemingly corrupt agency, as they've clearly spelled out, but it turns out that 97% of the workforce is a bunch of Looney Tune libs, okay? 97% of political contributions from USAID, employees, not the actual organization, the employees, went to Democrats in the 2024 election cycle. So in the election cycle, USAID staff made a total of $406,000 in political contributions. More than half of that money went to Kamala Harris, and 97% of that spending went to Democrats in general. Only $999, not even $1,000, $999 was spent on President Donald Trump and Republicans, okay? This anti-Trump attitude has then been exemplified by staff to people in power, like Elon Musk, like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, like I mentioned. They're in the process of auditing the spending of the agency, and employees of the agency are reportedly refusing to answer basic questions like, what is this program fund? Who gets this money? Very simple questions that someone that works at this agency should have no problem answering. Now, either way, it's either the employees don't know the answers to these questions, which is concerning, or they don't want to be compliant, which is also concerning. So very interesting. Now, I don't know if I don't think the USAID, or I'm not entirely set on whether the USAID deserves a total abolition. I believe that about the Department of Education. Peace. See ya. That's fine. Now, USAID, I see some merit in it, but it does deserve, whether it's abolished or not, it deserves an insane downsizing and more rigorous standards being implemented across the board of how we're giving that aid, right? It's sometimes necessary, most of the time not. And so I'd like to see a massive crackdown if we are not going to get an abolition. Anyway, let's move on to our next story. Donald Trump, this is not underreported at all. You have heard this, I would hope by now, that he signed an executive order last week protecting children from irreversible gender procedures, and hospitals have already started canceling appointments or, in some cases, getting rid of their gender programs and gender centers for children altogether. In New York, NYU Langone Health has canceled appointments for children, including 2 12-year-olds who are slated to start puberty blockers, again, medication that can have irreversible impacts on a child's development. In Colorado, a spokesperson for Denver Health told NBC that it had stopped performing these surgeries on children and young people under the age of 19. In Virginia, both VCU Health and the Children's Hospital of Richmond confirmed to NBC that they have halted their medication and surgeries on children and people under 19. UVA Health in Charlottesville has suspended all so-called gender-affirming care while it reviews its guidelines. But I want to take note of NYU Langone Health because there is one state that is threatening hospitals who do comply with the federal government, which is kind of ass backwards. But New York Attorney General Letitia James, this is the same woman who vowed to prosecute Donald Trump for charges she was going to find out of nowhere. Anyway, she is telling hospitals, including NYU Langone Health, to continue these gender procedures for minors despite this executive order. She said in a letter to New York healthcare facilities across the state, regardless of the ability of federal funding, because again, this isn't an outlawing of these surgeries or any care. It's the outlawing of, or the availability of the federal funding. So hospitals that engage in these will not get federal funding, period, end of sentence. So the letter reads, regardless of the availability of federal funding, we write to further remind you of your obligations to comply with New York state law, including those that prohibit discrimination against individuals based on their membership in a protected class, such as sex, gender identity, expression, sexual orientation, race, creed, color, you know the whole thing, right? Electing to refuse services to a class of individuals based on their protected status, such as withholding the ability of services from trans individuals based on their gender identity or their diagnosis of gender dysphoria, while offering such services to cisgender individuals, is discrimination under New York law. Now, here's where I'm just totally open to hearing more about this from a doctor. There's no care that's provided to cisgender people that wouldn't be allowed or provided to any other person based on any of those orientations, right? It's simply that you're not going to get care, quote unquote, care that is elective, right? No one is allowed to get this care anymore, really. It's not like cisgender people are getting this, or I don't want to say something that's going to trigger the YouTube algorithm, so I'm saying it, but I'm rolling my eyes, right? Other people are now going to have the same access to healthcare that we all have. Like, nothing changes about healthcare. The argument, you have to get really diluted into the argument of it to understand that these people genuinely believe that if we don't shoot minors up with gender-affirming hormones, that these kids are going to have a problem. Now, studies don't really show that. They show that the mental health of children stays about the same, if not declines, when they get on these medications. So they don't actually have data or studies to back that up. The only studies they have are studies done by the pharmaceutical industry paid for by the pharmaceutical industry and propped up by the pharmaceutical industry. So not real rigorous studies by any stretch of the means. So I'm very interested to see how a judge is going to look at that. And a judge will look at this, by the way. Today, families and doctors have announced lawsuits against the executive order. It's been put together, this lawsuit, by a bunch of LGBT organizations like PFLAG, the ACLU, as well as one mother, and the face of this lawsuit. She is the face of this lawsuit already. Her name is Kristen Chapman, and her story is that she moved her kid from Tennessee. Tennessee very famously outlawed these gender transition surgeries and whatnot. She moved her kid from Tennessee to Virginia to get this alleged treatment, and the day that the executive order went into place, the hospital said it wouldn't perform the care. And it was like the day after the executive order went in, the kid was going to get this alleged, quote, care. So to be clear, technically, like I said, hospitals can still perform these surgeries and distribute puberty blockers. It's not illegal. These hospitals are just not getting the funding. So what we need to see here is whether a judge issues a temporary pause on the executive orders, which again would just continue money flowing to these hospitals. It doesn't really change anything while this goes through the court. Now, this lawsuit is filed in Baltimore. So this is completely my judgment call here, my biases. I'm going to assume that the judge is going to side with the ACLU and that this executive order is going to be put on pause until this lawsuit goes through. But again, it's very unclear what grounds they're suing on. Are they suing on the grounds of they don't have, transgender minors don't have access to regular healthcare? Because they do. And they don't really have much data on their side to prove that this is necessary healthcare. So I'm interested to see how it plays out in the court. I'll keep you updated on it, like I always do. Anyway, let's get on to our next story, which is that 2 employees at DCA, which is the DC airport, were arrested for allegedly leaking a video of American Eagle Flight 5342 colliding with the U.S. Army Black Hawk. This obviously, very sadly, resulted in the huge loss of life. 67 people killed in the incident and 2 individuals. Oh, sorry, my camera went out for a second. That was really weird. Sorry, I was saying, there are 2 individuals that were charged here. Mohammed Lamine Mbengwe, I think, 21 years old, young black man, and Jonathan Savoy, who is a 45-year-old man. They are facing charges of computer trespassing and making unauthorized copies of the plane crash recording and then leaking that footage to CNN. Now, part of me agrees with these arrests because it's like, I get it. We have systems in place to ensure that the footage is safe and secure, and you don't want employees leaking footage without authorization. I get it. I'm a rule follower. But at the same time, if this footage wasn't released when it was, the information overload and conspiracy theories, not fun conspiracy, genuine conspiracy theories that would have come from this would have been too insane to tamper down. This video getting leaked gave us a clear picture of what happened from the get-go. And we could deduce what had happened, or at least get a semblance of what had happened within an hour or 2 of that plane crash. It's the internet and news working the way we would ideally want it to. Now, obviously, there's still an investigation, still lots of lingering question about what's going on. I'll be honest, when I first saw this news, first of all, I was freaking out because I had to get on an American Airlines flight the next morning, but this is not about me. It's just true. That was my first thought, freaking out. I don't want to get on a plane tomorrow. Next, when I first saw it, I just kind of assumed it was a Republican senator that was on board because we had these huge controversial hearings. We had Tulsi Gabbard hearing, RFK hearings, which are literally razor thin, successful so far, kind of, but razor thin right now. And so I was like, oh, well, I mean, on a subcommittee of, I believe it's 25 people, if one Republican's out, these nominees are done for. So I was like, okay, well, who's on the plane? That was the first thing I wanted to know. Also, no, side note, I just watched that new Jason Bateman movie. It's called Carry On. It's I could see what they were doing. They were trying to do a Die Hard kind of Christmas movie thing. But basically, it's about a Russian hit group trying to take out a U.S. representative. So very top of mind for me. But anyway, that's where I am on this story. I understand the arrest, but I'm really thankful for the footage. I know that doesn't fit into like a neat little box ideologically. But I guess that's the whole point of the show, right? And by the way, if you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you want to ensure you never miss an update or an episode, be sure to check out my Substack. It's linked below. It's underreportedstories.substack.com. I'm in the process right now of revamping this newsletter alongside with my rebrand. So be sure to subscribe. You're going to get updates in the next week, and it's totally worth it. I don't really blow up your inbox or anything. It's all good stuff. You like this show, you'll love the newsletter. Anyway, let's get to our next story. Woo, this one feels good. The infamous grifter, Ibram X Kendi, is getting kind of canceled. So in 2020, Boston University announced a Center for Antiracist Research that was founded by a man named Ibram X Kendi. He became this very controversial figure. He calls literally everything racist without even being able to define racism or debate people about his ideas. He refuses to debate anybody. Kind of pathetic. But Boston University announced it's shutting down this grift center. Kendi's center basically had this 5-year contract with Boston University, and it expires on June 30th of 2025. And that's kind of like the end of that. This didn't come out of nowhere, though. Obviously, I think it's very obvious. We're seeing a big cultural shift away from this kind of insanity. But also, the center was a money pit, and they got nothing out of it. The whole thing was marred by allegations of financial corruption. Back in 2023, the $50 million endowment for the center had essentially dried up, and then the center had to cut a third of its workforce. So just nutty stuff happening around, and there's really not much to show for it. Ibram Kendi, he's now headed over to Howard University, which is an HBCU in DC, where I'm just going to assume he's going to grift more, going to siphon off more money and do literally nothing to benefit the students, to benefit the university, to benefit research, to benefit this country at all. I don't know why anybody would hire him unless, no, I don't. I can't think of a reason. I'm not going to be nice here. I have no idea why the hell anybody would hire this guy after he just blew $50 million and got nothing from it. He's clearly exposed himself as a grifter. But seeing the university shut this down gives me hope. The universities are waking up to grifts in 2020. But my problem is like, great, 5 years after the fact, you shut this down, too little too late. I hope we learn from our mistakes, but I don't think we're going to. I wish people would get more vigilant about jumping on emotion-driven trends like BLM and stuff like that. But we're like, these institutions are not like that. They are so reactive instead of driven by morals and goals and missions. It's laughable. It really makes you puts into perspective this idea. You show up to orientation when you go to college and they have like little mission-driven statements and stuff like that. You don't stick to your mission, dumbass. The second that BLM comes running around, all of a sudden every university is like, I'll give you $50 million. I'll give you $50 million. Such weenies, truly weenie behavior. But maybe, just maybe some universities learned a lesson from this grift. I'm doubtful though. Anyway, let's get to our fifth and final story. Now, this story has an article attached to it, linked below from the Daily Caller. It is a really intricate story. And like I said, linked below. I really think you should read it if you're interested, if this piques your interest at all. But I'm going to give you a broad overview just for the sake of details, keeping your interest and whatnot. Okay. So China, being China, is attempting to control the American justice system with nonprofits operating in the country that are directly linked to the CCP. So the CCP has nonprofits. These nonprofits register themselves in America, and then they act like nonprofits, except they don't, okay? So this story is taking place in 4 places: California, DC, and suburban DC, so like Maryland, Virginia as well, Hawaii, and New York. Primarily, this is where this is all happening. So these nonprofits operate in these areas, and what they do is they share information about what's happening on U.S. soil with Chinese law enforcement. What the hell? So the Chinese government claims it has these nonprofits and this law enforcement on the ground in America to handle very mundane things like, okay, a Chinese person's driver's license is about to expire, it needs to be renewed. That's what we're here for. Or international divorce courts or something like that. Very unclear why this can't all just be done by the embassy and we need like these little mini law enforcement agencies to do that. But what they are actually doing, according to this months-long report from the Daily Caller, is they're creating a mini legal system that's spying on and could potentially punish Chinese nationals who come to America and disagree with anything the Chinese government says. So any dissidents who come here for a better life, legally of course, are kept under the watchful eye of the CCP, and we're just kind of letting it happen. Now, my thought process is, okay, everybody has an issue, or not everybody, but a lot of people have an issue with TikTok putting out propaganda on the app to people. But we're like somehow just rolling our eyes and shrugging our shoulders about the fact that there's a full-blown fucking CCP law enforcement operation happening here in America. We're literally letting China run their own system of policing and law enforcement here in America, and they're doing it under the guise of nonprofits. No. Go spend your effort and time and energy shutting that shit down, okay? We're not subsidizing the Chinese government's repressive dictatorship here in America, okay? Stop worrying about TikTok. Start worrying about real shit. Jeez. Now, the other thing that came to my mind when I saw this was like, whether we're talking about the border or these Chinese, literally insane law enforcement operations uncovered or disguised as nonprofits, is that our government and DOGE really needs to take a look at these nonprofits and ensure that nonprofits are in fact operating as nonprofits. You wouldn't believe how many of these nonprofits are working down at the border and profiting off of the human trafficking happening at our southern border. Now, caveat, this can so easily be politicized. We saw that in the Obama era where the IRS was targeting nonprofits that are specifically Christian and conservative. I am not calling for that. I'm not calling for that of liberal groups at all. I am calling for a standard that all nonprofits should meet and all nonprofits should be held to, regardless of their political opinions and sways and whatnot. I just feel like it's the bare minimum, right? Anyway, before we wrap up today's show, I actually have an update for you guys from a story about last week. So last week when I had Bradley on the show, which was Thursday's episode, we were chatting about a party I was at in DC for our inauguration weekend that was featured in New York Magazine. And the article basically whitewashed the party, making it appear as though the only people attending the party were like mean white people, when in fact that was not the truth. The party was very racially diverse and really showcased Trump's new coalition of people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, but corporate media obviously tried to lie through omission. So update on that, my friend CJ Pearson, who threw the party, has obtained legal counsel and plans to sue the New York Magazine for painting all of us as racists, which is chef's kiss, beautiful, okay? I love this because to me, this is just yet another indication that we as conservatives are not taking it laying down anymore. The media can't just paint us as racist through omission. Like, this is on purpose done to make young, impressionable people think poorly of us, and even details omitted or details not added by omission or whatever the standard is, that is got to go away. Like, we just got to start telling the truth about things and hold media to that standard. So I'm very excited about this. I will keep you guys updated. I've asked CJ to come on the show, so hopefully he can come on and explain more in a little bit of time once we understand the full scope of the lawsuit or like the legal filings against New York Magazine. Anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. If you are a real one and you made it to the end of today's show, will you drop the hospital emoji so I know that you're part of the community? I will see you back here on Thursday for our final episode here in this studio. Bye! Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment about how beautiful, stunning, and funny I am. And if you want more content based in logic, be sure to click over here for more videos and clips of my show. If you have the means to financially support the show, consider purchasing from my merch line, Based Apparel, linked right below. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye, friends.